I stare at the coffee on the counter. Just $3.75. A simple decision for most people, but not for me. Not anymore. This small purchase will cost me exactly 3 years and 9 months of my life. I can feel my heart already constricting at the thought, can almost see the grey hairs sprouting at my temples. The barista watches me, impatient. People around me go about their day, blissfully unaware of what their small transactions truly cost. They've never had to calculate the precise mathematics of mortality, never felt time being physically extracted from their bodies with each dollar spent. The world is full of people trading their time for money. I'm the only one who trades money for time at the cruelly fixed rate of 1 year per dollar. My name is Daniel Morgan. 6 months ago, I became an overnight millionaire. Today, I look 30 years older, and I'm running out of time. Daniel Morgan's alarm clock buzzed with the same persistent whine it had for the past 7 years. He silenced it with a practiced swipe, his eyes still closed, body refusing to acknowledge the Tuesday that awaited him. The small apartment on the east side of the city held the staleness of a life lived in repetition, dishes from last night's solitary dinner still soaking in the sink, bills stacked on the coffee table, their red final notice stamps like accusatory eyes following him across the room. At 34, Daniel had mastered the art of getting by. Not thriving, not failing, just existing in that precarious middle ground where dreams were perpetually deferred but never quite abandoned. The photo on his nightstand showed a younger version of himself with his parents, their faces beaming with the certainty that their son would achieve everything they hadn't. That photo was 8 years old now, taken before his father's heart attack and his mother's subsequent descent into the fog of early dementia. Before the medical bills had consumed his modest savings and future plans. Another day, he murmured. The words a ritual that carried no conviction. He shuffled to the bathroom, avoiding his reflection in the mirror. He knew exactly what he would see. The dark circles under hazel eyes, the premature lines etched around his mouth, the slight stoop in shoulders that once stood straight with ambition. The community college where he taught mathematics part-time was a 20-minute bus ride away. As he waited at the stop, clutching a travel mug of coffee that did little to dispel the fog in his mind, Daniel found himself staring at a lottery billboard across the street. $750 million jackpot, it proclaimed in garish letters, alongside the cliché tagline, "Dreams do come true." Daniel snorted. The statistics professor in him knew the odds, knew that he was more likely to be struck by lightning while being attacked by a shark than to win that jackpot. Yet he found himself patting his wallet where a single ticket resided, purchased in a moment of weakness after visiting his mother at Golden Pines Assisted Living, where she had looked at him with vacant eyes and asked if he was one of the doctors. The lottery ticket felt heavier than it should, weighted with desperate hope he couldn't afford to acknowledge. His phone buzzed with a text from Ellie, his on-again, off-again girlfriend of 3 years, currently in the taking-a-break phase of their cyclical relationship. "Are we still meeting for coffee tomorrow?" "I have some news." Daniel stared at the message, a familiar knot forming in his stomach. Ellie's news was rarely good for them. The last time, it had been about the job offer in Seattle that she was considering. The time before that, it had been about her ex reaching out after 2 years of silence. "Sure, 4 p.m. at Marigold's." "D." He texted back, trying to ignore the sinking feeling that tomorrow might be the day Ellie finally decided their story had reached its conclusion. The bus arrived with a hydraulic sigh, and Daniel climbed aboard, slipping his lottery ticket back into his wallet, where it sat beside the $43 that needed to last until payday on Friday. He glanced once more at the lottery billboard, then turned away, refusing to feed the foolish hope that had taken root, despite his rational mind's protests. Some dreams, he had learned, were best left undreamed. The news came at 11:42 p.m. While Daniel was grading papers at his small kitchen table, red pen poised over a student's creative interpretation of calculus. His phone buzzed with a news alert. The lottery numbers had been drawn. With a self-deprecating smile, Daniel retrieved the crumpled ticket from his wallet. He'd played the same 6 numbers for years, his parents' birthdays, his own, and the day his father had passed away. Numbers that held meaning in a meaningless game of chance. "Let's see how not rich I am tonight," he muttered, pulling up the results on his phone. 17, 23, 34, 42, 56. Daniel blinked, the numbers swimming before his eyes. He looked at his ticket, then back at the screen. 23, 34, 42, 56. The red pen slipped from his fingers, rolling across the table and leaving a crimson streak on the student's paper. A strike-through that seemed to cross out his old life. "No," he whispered, his heart hammering against his ribs. "This isn't," but it was. 6 numbers, perfectly aligned. The statistical anomaly. The 1 in 300 million chance. Daniel stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor with a sound that seemed to come from miles away. He paced the length of his small apartment, clutching the ticket so tightly it crumpled further in his palm. Thoughts raced through his mind like startled birds. His mother could have the best care available. He could quit his job. He could travel. He could help his few friends. He could finally breathe without the constant pressure of financial anxiety crushing his chest. Sleep eluded him that night. Daniel sat on his balcony, watching the city lights flicker below, the lottery ticket placed carefully on the small table beside him, anchored by his father's old pocket watch, a family heirloom that had survived when everything else had been sold to pay for care and treatments. The watch had stopped working years ago, frozen at 3:17, the approximate time of his father's death. As the first light of dawn painted the horizon in tentative strokes of pale gold, Daniel felt a strange sensation, as if something fundamental had shifted in the universe. A cool breeze swept across the balcony, rustling the lottery ticket. For a brief, irrational moment, he considered letting the wind take it, carrying away this unexpected twist of fate before it could change him. Instead, he tucked the ticket safely back into his wallet, next to his ID and the photo of his parents he always carried. It was only paper after all. Paper with numbers that somehow aligned with random balls in a machine. Paper that would transform into millions of dollars. Paper that felt unnaturally warm against his fingers, as though it held an energy all its own. Daniel finally fell asleep as the city began to wake. His dreams filled with numbers that spiraled and danced, forming patterns that seemed meaningful but remained just beyond comprehension. And through it all, a strange, persistent ticking, like his father's watch had suddenly sprung back to life after all these years of silence. The Lottery Commission offices were housed in a gleaming glass building downtown, a structure that seemed designed to reflect both transparency and the glittering promise of fortune. Daniel sat in a plush chair across from Ms. Harriet Wells, the Commission's executive director, his hands clammy as she explained the process of claiming such a substantial prize. "Now, Mr. Morgan, you've elected to take the lump sum option rather than the annuity payments, correct?" Ms. Wells peered at him over tortoise-shell glasses, her expression professionally neutral, yet somehow suggesting she thought this was a mistake. Daniel nodded. "Yes. After taxes, that would be approximately $312 million. Ms. Wells smiled thinly. "Precisely. That's quite a change from—" She glanced at the paperwork before her. "Your current position as an adjunct mathematics professor." There was something in her tone that made Daniel uncomfortable, as if she were assessing whether he deserved this windfall. He resisted the urge to justify himself, to explain about his mother's care, about the years of struggling paycheck to paycheck. "There's just one final document," Miss Wells continued, sliding a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany desk. "It's a bit unusual, but required for prizes of this magnitude." The document was unlike the others he had signed. The paper was thicker, almost parchment-like, with a subtle sheen that caught the light strangely. The text was printed in an elegant, antiquated font that reminded Daniel of old books he'd studied in college. "What exactly is this?" he asked, scanning the dense paragraphs of legal jargon. "Oh, just a special terms acknowledgement," Ms. Wells said dismissively. "It essentially states that you understand the responsibility that comes with such wealth." "Bureaucratic nonsense, really, but we need it signed." Daniel frowned, reading more carefully. Most of it was standard boilerplate language, but one paragraph near the bottom stood out. The recipient acknowledges that all possessions come with cost, that balance must be maintained, and that value exchanged must be commensurate with value received. In accepting this fortune, the recipient accepts all associated conditions and consequences thereof, both seen and unseen. "This seems oddly philosophical for a legal document," Daniel remarked. Ms. Wells laughed, the sound brittle in the quiet room. "Our legal department has a flair for the dramatic. It basically just means, with great power comes great responsibility. Spider-Man wisdom for the newly wealthy." Still uneasy, Daniel hesitated with the pen hovering over the signature line. He thought of his mother, of the specialized care facility he had researched that might help slow her cognitive decline. He thought of Ellie, and whether money might somehow bridge the growing distance between them. He thought of never again having to count coins for bus fare. He signed. The moment the pen left the paper, Daniel felt a curious sensation, a slight tightening in his chest, like the first warning of a coming storm. He placed his hand over his heart, breathing deeply. "Are you all right, Mr. Morgan?" Ms. Wells asked, already gathering the signed documents. "Yes, just overwhelmed, I suppose." "Perfectly normal," she assured him, standing to indicate their business was concluded. "Your funds will be transferred to your account within 48 hours. Congratulations, Mr. Morgan. Your life has changed forever." As Daniel stood to shake her hand, he noticed a strange detail he had somehow missed before, an ornate timepiece on Ms. Wells's desk, identical in design to his father's pocket watch, its hands frozen at exactly 3:17. When he glanced back at her in confusion, her smile had changed subtly, knowing, almost predatory. "Do spend it wisely, Mr. Morgan," she said softly. "Everything comes with a price." The notification arrived while Daniel was sitting in his apartment, surrounded by the same furniture, the same walls, the same life, only now with the knowledge that $312 million rested in his newly created bank account. The chime from his phone was ordinary, but it might as well have been a thunderclap. Transfer complete. $312 million. The number was so vast, it lost meaning, becoming abstract, like trying to comprehend the distance to the nearest star. Daniel's first instinct was to call someone. But who? His mother wouldn't understand. His few friends would change the moment they knew. Ellie. He wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Instead, he sat in silence, the weight of possibility pressing down on him. After an hour of stillness, Daniel made a decision. His mother deserved better than Golden Pines, with its overworked staff and antiseptic hallways. He'd researched Meadowbrook Memory Care for months, an exclusive facility with experimental treatments, personalized care plans, and grounds designed specifically to support cognitive function in dementia patients. The waiting list was 2 years long, and the cost prohibitive, $25,000 per month, but money could change that. Daniel made the call, his voice steady as he explained that he could pay a year in advance, plus the priority placement donation. The admissions director had once higher working life. Of course, Mr. Morgan, the admissions director said, her tone shifting from professional to deferential once the payment was mentioned. "We can arrange for Mrs. Morgan's transfer as early as next week." After ending the call, Daniel felt a strange shortness of breath, followed by a sharp, stabbing pain in his chest. He gasped, clutching at his shirt, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. The pain intensified for several terrifying seconds, then subsided as quickly as it had come. Panic attack, he thought, trying to steady his breathing. Just the stress of everything happening so quickly. That evening, he stood before the bathroom mirror, examining his reflection for the first time in days. There was something different about his appearance, something he couldn't quite place. His hair seemed to have more grey at the temples than he remembered. The lines around his eyes appeared deeper. He looked older. Probably just the harsh bathroom lighting combined with exhaustion. His phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. "Still on for coffee tomorrow." Daniel had forgotten their planned meeting amidst the whirlwind of claiming the lottery prize. Now, with nearly unfathomable wealth at his disposal, he wondered how to tell her, or whether to tell her at all. Their relationship had been strained by financial stress for years. Would money solve their problems, or create new ones? "Yes, see you at 4 hours," he replied. Later, as he prepared for bed, Daniel noticed his father's pocket watch on the nightstand. On impulse, he picked it up and popped open the case. The watch face stared back at him, the hands still frozen at 3:17, except now the second hand ticked rhythmically, counting time that had been suspended for years. Daniel snapped the watch shut, telling himself it was his imagination. When he reopened it, the second hand was indeed motionless, exactly as it had been for the past 7 years. But as he drifted into uneasy sleep, the phantom ticking followed him into his dreams, along with Ms. Wells's parting words. "Everything comes with a price." The cafe was busy when Daniel arrived. The afternoon crowd clustered around small tables, laptops open and conversations flowing. Ellie was already there, her copper hair catching the sunlight from the window, her fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug. Something tightened in Daniel's chest at the sight of her, a familiar ache of wanting and uncertainty. He ordered a black coffee at the counter, hesitating when it came time to pay. It was just $3.75, an amount he would have handed over without thought last week. Now he found himself staring at the bills in his wallet, a strange reluctance holding him back. "Sir," the barista prompted. Daniel shook off the feeling and paid, joining Ellie at her table by the window. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You look different," she said immediately, studying his face. "Are you feeling okay?" "Just tired," Daniel replied, unsettled by her observation. "You said you had news." Ellie nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture he recognized from countless conversations over the years. "I took the job in Seattle. I start in 3 weeks." The words hung between them, heavy with finality. 3 weeks. 2,000 miles. The slow dissolution of their relationship made official. "I see," Daniel said, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. He should feel more devastated, he thought. Instead, he felt a strange sense of detachment, as if he were watching their conversation from outside himself. "Congratulations." Ellie frowned, clearly expecting a different reaction. "That's it? Congratulations." Daniel wanted to tell her about the lottery then, to see if it would change anything. To watch her expression transform when she realized he could fly to Seattle every weekend, buy a house there, remove the financial constraints that had always complicated their relationship. But something stopped him. "I have news too," he said instead. "I'm moving Mom to Meadowbrook next week." Ellie's eyes widened. "Daniel, that place costs a fortune." "How? I came into some money," he said vaguely. "An inheritance from my dad's side." The lie tasted bitter. But he wasn't ready for the truth yet, not until he understood what was happening to him. After coffee, they parted with an awkward hug and promises to talk again before she left. Promises they both knew might not be kept. Daniel walked home instead of taking the bus, needing time to think. The encounter had left him unsettled, not just because of Ellie's news, but because of something that had happened as he paid for his coffee. The moment the barista took his money, Daniel had felt it again. That sharp, stabbing pain in his chest, followed by a wave of dizziness. It had passed quickly, but in the cafe bathroom afterward, he had examined his reflection and seen what Ellie had noticed. He looked older, not dramatically, but noticeably. A few more grey hairs, deeper lines around his eyes, a certain weathering that hadn't been there before. Now, as he walked, a terrible suspicion began to form in his mind. He stopped at a convenience store and stood before the refrigerated section, staring at the array of bottled drinks. After a moment of deliberation, he selected a water priced at 250 zals. At the counter, he paid careful attention to his body as he handed over the money. The sensation was immediate. A constriction in his chest, a brief flutter of his heart that felt wrong, and the strange sense of something being drawn out of him. It lasted only seconds, but when he looked at his hands afterward, he could swear the skin appeared slightly looser around his knuckles. That night, Daniel conducted a grim experiment. He ordered takeout online, selecting items of varying prices and paying electronically. Each transaction, from the $12.99 main dish to the $1.50 add-on egg roll, triggered the same physical response, stronger with larger amounts, barely perceptible with smaller ones. By midnight, looking in the mirror was like confronting a stranger. The man who stared back at him appeared to be in his early 40s rather than 34. His hair was noticeably grayer, the crow's feet around his eyes more pronounced. His posture slightly stooped. With trembling hands, Daniel retrieved the special terms document he had signed at the lottery commission. He read it again, searching for hidden meanings, for some explanation of what was happening to him. The cryptic paragraph now seemed to mock him. The recipient acknowledges that all possessions come with cost, that balance must be maintained. In a moment of clarity that felt like ice water in his veins, Daniel understood. Every dollar spent was taking time from his life, literally aging him. He had gained a fortune but lost his future. One transaction at a time, Daniel sank to the floor, his back against the bathroom wall. As the true meaning of Miss Wells's words echoed in his mind, everything comes with a price, and his had been set at 1 year per dollar. Daniel didn't leave his apartment for 3 days. Food delivery stopped. He couldn't bear to age himself further. Instead, he subsisted on what remained in his cupboards: stale cereal, canned soup, packets of ramen that had been his staples during lean months, water from the tap, nothing that cost him precious time. The mathematics professor in him needed to quantify, to understand the exact nature of his curse. He created spreadsheets, tracking each expenditure against observed physical changes. He took photos of himself at regular intervals, comparing them meticulously for signs of aging. He measured his heart rate, his lung capacity, the flexibility of his joints. The evidence was undeniable. The correlation was perfect. $1, 1 year. The $375,000 he had spent on his mother's care had aged him 375 years biologically. His apparent age was now around 41, meaning his metabolism had somehow compensated for the full effect of the curse. He wasn't physically 409 years old. Rather, the years were being compressed, accelerating his aging process. At this rate, spending just a fraction of his fortune would push him into old age. Spending more would kill him. Daniel sat at his kitchen table, staring at the calculations. $312 million. If he spent it all, he would age by 312 million years, an incomprehensible number, far beyond any human lifespan. Even spending 1% would age him over 3 million years. He was, effectively, the richest and poorest man alive. Wealthy beyond imagination, yet unable to spend a dollar without sacrificing his future. The situation's cruel irony was not lost on Daniel. All his life he had worried about money, pinched pennies, calculated budgets with mathematical precision. Now each dollar had a fixed, terrible value, 1 year of his life, and no bargaining could change that exchange rate. On the 4th day, his phone rang. It was Meadowbrook, calling to confirm his mother's transfer, scheduled for the following morning. Daniel closed his eyes, his grip tightening on the phone. "Is there a problem, Mr. Morgan?" the administrator asked when he remained silent. "No," Daniel finally replied. "No problem. Everything is proceeding as planned." After hanging up, Daniel looked at his reflection in the window, at the grey-streaked hair, the lined face, the eyes that had aged decades in days. He had sacrificed 375 years of his life to give his mother the best care possible. Was it worth it? The question felt blasphemous, yet he couldn't help but ask it. His father's pocket watch sat on the table before him, ticking steadily now, as if awakened by his curse. Daniel opened it, staring at the face that had been frozen for so long. The time read 4:23, no longer stuck at the moment of his father's death, but moving forward, counting down his own remaining years. That night, Daniel dreamed of Miss Wells. In the dream, she sat across from him at a vast table, an hourglass between them. As sand poured from top to bottom, she collected it in small vials, labeling each with a dollar amount. "You didn't read the fine print," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "Nobody ever does." "Why me?" Daniel asked. "Why choose me for this curse?" Miss Wells smiled, the expression devoid of warmth. "The universe requires balance, Mr. Morgan. Some win, some lose. Some gain money, some gain time. You can't have both. That's the rule." "I never agreed to these terms," Daniel protested. "Oh, but you did." She held up the parchment with his signature, which seemed to glow in the dreamscape. "Most lottery winners destroy themselves anyway, you know. They spend themselves into oblivion, bankruptcy, addiction, broken relationships. At least your destruction has a mathematical precision to it." "I thought you'd appreciate that, Professor." Daniel woke with a gasp, his heart pounding painfully in his chest. The dream lingered, feeling more like memory than fantasy. He glanced at the bedside clock, 3:17 a.m., the exact time his father had died. The time that had been frozen on the pocket watch for 7 years. A coincidence, surely. Yet in that moment, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that nothing about his situation was coincidental, that some cosmic equation was being balanced. With him as a variable in a formula he didn't understand. The morning brought weak sunlight filtering through thin curtains, illuminating Daniel's apartment in a pale, washed-out light that matched his mood. Today, his mother would be transferred to Meadowbrook, the first tangible result of his cursed fortune. He dressed carefully, selecting clothes that would disguise his accelerated aging as much as possible. A collared shirt to hide the increasing looseness of his neck, a sweater to mask his slightly stooped posture, hair carefully styled to minimize the visibility of grey. Looking in the mirror, he could pass for an early 40s professor who took poor care of himself. Not ideal, but not so dramatically changed as to raise immediate questions. Golden Pines assisted living was as he remembered it. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting that hummed and occasionally flickered, the pervasive smell of disinfectant barely masking less pleasant odors. The staff moved with the efficient weariness of the underpaid and overworked. Daniel found his mother in the common room, seated by a window, a book open but unread on her lap. Margaret Morgan had once been vibrant, a high school literature teacher who could recite Shakespearean sonnets from memory and who had instilled in Daniel his love of patterns and puzzles. Now she was a diminished version of herself, her once sharp mind clouded by the progressive fog of dementia. "Mom," Daniel said gently, sitting beside her. "It's Daniel." "Your son?" She turned to him, her gaze taking a moment to focus. "Daniel," she repeated, the name emerging as a question. Then her brow furrowed. "You look different," Daniel forced a smile. "Just haven't been sleeping well. Big day today. Remember I told you about the new place, Meadowbrook?" His mother nodded vaguely, though he wasn't sure she recalled their previous conversations about the move. "Will there be gardens?" "I miss gardens." "Yes, Mom. Beautiful gardens designed especially for walking. And private rooms with windows overlooking those gardens. And specialists who can help with your memory," as he helped pack her few belongings. Daniel was struck by how little his mother possessed after a lifetime of work and care. Some clothes, a few books, photo albums, the quilt his grandmother had made. An entire life distilled to what could fit in 2 suitcases. The transfer itself was smooth, the staff at Golden Pines efficient in their handling of paperwork and medical records. His mother seemed neither distressed nor particularly interested in the proceedings, maintaining the slightly detached air that had become her default state. The contrast upon arriving at Meadowbrook couldn't have been more stark. Where Golden Pines had been institutional and sterile, Meadowbrook resembled an upscale resort, expansive grounds with winding paths, a lobby with natural stone and warm wood accents, staff members who looked alert and engaged rather than exhausted. The facility director herself showed them to Margaret's suite, a spacious room with a sitting area, private bathroom, and large windows overlooking a Japanese-inspired garden. The walls were painted a soft blue that research had shown to be calming for dementia patients. The furniture designed for both comfort and ease of use. "This is beautiful," Daniel said, watching his mother as she moved to the window, pressing her palm against the glass as she looked out at the garden. "We believe environment plays a crucial role in cognitive health," the director explained. "Everything here is designed with that in mind, from the color schemes to the layout of the walking paths." As they settled his mother in, Daniel experienced a curious mixture of emotions. Pride that he could provide this level of care. Grief for what his mother had lost and would continue to lose as her condition progressed. And a new, uncomfortable feeling, resentment. Not at his mother, never at her, but at the situation that forced him to choose between her well-being and his own lifespan. The thought made him ashamed. What kind of son resented sacrificing for his mother, who had sacrificed everything for him? Before leaving, Daniel sat with Margaret as she had a cup of tea in the facility's sunlit atrium. She seemed calmer here, more present than she had been at Golden Pines. "Daniel," she said suddenly, reaching out to touch his face with cool fingers. "You look like your father now." The observation startled him. His mother's moments of clarity had become increasingly rare over the past year. "Do I?" he asked gently. She nodded, her eyes showing a flash of their old sharpness. "He aged quickly too after the diagnosis. Worried himself into old age." She patted his hand. "Don't do that, dear. Time is precious." The irony of her words hit Daniel like a physical blow. Time was indeed precious, and he had just traded 375 years of his for her care. As he drove home, the weight of his decision settled over him. He had secured his mother the best possible care for her condition. That was something, but at what cost? And what would he do with the rest of his cursed fortune? Money he couldn't spend without literally killing himself? The pocket watch, which he now carried with him always, ticked in his jacket pocket, marking seconds he could never regain. Ellie called the next evening, her voice tight with concern. "Your neighbor said he saw you yesterday. He barely recognized you, Daniel. He said you look older, a lot older." "Are you sick? What's going on?" Daniel closed his eyes, pressing his fingers against his temple, where a headache had been building all day. He had known this conversation would come eventually, but he had hoped for more time to figure out what to say. "It's complicated," he finally answered. "Complicated." Ellie's voice rose. "Daniel, Mike said you look like you've aged 10 years in a week. That's not complicated, that's terrifying. I'm coming over." "No, don't." But she had already hung up. Daniel paced his apartment, anxiety churning in his stomach. How could he explain what was happening to him? It sounded insane, a supernatural curse attached to lottery winnings. Yet the evidence was written on his face, in his graying hair, in the new ache in his joints when he climbed stairs. 40 minutes later, Ellie was at his door. When he opened it, her sharp intake of breath confirmed what he already knew. His transformation was obvious, impossible to hide from someone who knew him well. "Oh my God," she whispered, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Daniel, what's happened to you?" Under her intense scrutiny, the story spilled out. The lottery win, the strange document, the terrible price attached to each dollar spent. As he spoke, he showed her his documentation, the spreadsheets tracking his expenditures against physical changes, the time-lapse photos showing his accelerated aging, the medical readings he had taken. To his surprise, Ellie didn't dismiss his claims outright. She examined his evidence with the sharp analytical mind that had first attracted him to her years ago. Her background in medical research made her a more receptive audience than most would have been. "This is," she began, then stopped, shaking her head. I want to say it's impossible, but the data is compelling. Have you seen a doctor? And tell them what? That I'm aging because I spent money from my cursed lottery winnings. You could just say you're experiencing rapid aging symptoms. Let them run tests. They just think I have progeria or some other aging disorder. They couldn't help me. Ellie fell silent, continuing to review his documentation. Finally, she looked up. If your theory is correct and each dollar equals 1 year, then you've already spent. How much exactly? $375 and $429.75, Daniel answered promptly. Mostly for Mom's care. That's over 375 years of your life, Ellie said, her voice hushed. But you don't look 409 years old. You look, what, mid-40s? The effect seems to be compressed. I'm aging at an accelerated rate, but not literally 1 year per dollar in chronological terms. It's more like the life force is being extracted at that exchange rate. Ellie stood and walked to the window, her back to him. What happens if you give the money away? Does that trigger the aging too? Daniel hadn't considered this. I don't know. I haven't tried. And what about your mother's ongoing care? Every month will cost you another 25,000 years of your life. The stark reality of his situation, put into those terms, made Daniel feel physically ill. I've been thinking about that. I could set up a trust for her care that pays directly to Meadowbrook. Maybe if I'm not directly spending the money, or maybe the trust expenditures would still affect you, Ellie countered. You don't know the exact mechanisms of this curse. She turned back to him, her expression softening. This is why you didn't seem upset about Seattle, isn't it? You're dealing with something much bigger. Daniel nodded, grateful she understood. I want to be happy for you, Ellie, I do. But right now I'm just trying to figure out how to handle this situation. We'll figure it out together, she said, crossing the room to take his hand. I'm not going to Seattle. Not now. Ellie, no. This is your career opportunity. I can't let you. It's my choice, she interrupted firmly. And right now, I choose to stay and help you understand what's happening. The job can wait. That night, they sat at Daniel's kitchen table with his laptop open between them, surrounded by notes and calculations. Ellie approached the problem with the methodical precision of a researcher, breaking it down into testable hypotheses. If we assume the aging is linked specifically to spending, we need to test the boundaries, she said. What constitutes spending in the context of the curse? Does transferring money count? Investing it? Giving it away? What about if someone else spends it on your behalf? They devised a series of small experiments to test these questions. Daniel would transfer token amounts to different accounts, invest small sums in various vehicles, give a modest amount to charity. Each transaction would be documented meticulously, with physical measurements taken before and after. We need to find loopholes, Ellie said, her eyes bright with determination. $312 million could do so much good in the world. There has to be a way to use it without killing you. As she spoke, Daniel found himself watching her, the animated way her hands moved as she explained her ideas, the intensity in her expression. For the first time in days, he felt something other than despair. Not hope exactly, but purpose. A problem to solve, with parameters and variables. A mathematical challenge. Thank you, he said quietly, when they finally exhausted themselves with planning. For believing me. For staying. Ellie squeezed his hand, her expression serious. We'll figure this out, Daniel. Every curse has its breaking point. We just need to find the formula, as she left, promising to return in the morning to begin their experiments. Daniel found himself thinking that if anyone could help him solve this impossible equation, it was Ellie. She had always been the one to push him beyond his self-imposed limitations, to challenge his assumptions, to see possibilities where he saw only constraints. For the first time since discovering the terrible cost of his fortune, Daniel allowed himself to consider that there might be a solution, a way to escape the mathematical certainty of his curse. Ready? Ellie asked, her finger hovering over the keyboard. They sat side by side at Daniel's kitchen table, the laptop open to his banking portal. Daniel nodded, electrodes attached to his chest monitoring his heart rate. A blood pressure cuff was wrapped around his arm, and a small device clipped to his finger measured oxygen saturation. Ellie had borrowed the equipment from the research lab where she worked, telling colleagues she was conducting a personal study on stress responses to financial decisions. Transfer of $1 to my account. Initiated at 10:14 a.m., Ellie narrated, documenting their experiment as she pressed the button. Daniel tensed, anticipating the now familiar sensation. It came immediately, the constriction in his chest, the momentary dizziness, the strange pulling feeling as if something essential was being drawn from him. Physiological response observed, Ellie noted, watching the readings spike on her tablet. Heart rate increased by 22 beats per minute, blood pressure elevated to 142/95, oxygen saturation dropped to 94%. Duration of response, approximately 7.3 seconds. She took photographs of Daniel from multiple angles, then measured various physical markers. The gray at his temples, the crow's feet around his eyes, the looseness of skin at his throat, visible aging consistent with previous pattern, she concluded, adding the data to their growing spreadsheet. Approximately 1 year of accelerated aging per dollar spent. Moving to experiment 2. Over the course of the day, they tested various financial transactions. The results painted a disturbing picture. Any movement of money from Daniel's lottery winnings triggered the aging effect. Transferring funds to another account, using his debit card, writing a check, even setting up automatic payments, all extracted their toll. Investment, however, yielded a surprising discovery. When Daniel purchased stocks, the aging effect occurred. But when those stocks increased in value due to market forces, he experienced no reverse effect. The curse, it seemed, operated in only one direction. No matter how much his investments might grow, he would never regain the years he had lost. What about giving money away? Daniel suggested as afternoon stretched into evening. If I donate to charity, does that trigger the same response? They tested this with a $1 donation to a children's hospital. Daniel felt the familiar sensation, perhaps even more intensely than with other transactions. No loophole there, Ellie said, recording the results. In fact, it seems to have a slightly stronger effect. Interesting. Their final experiment of the day was the most promising. Ellie used her own money to purchase groceries for Daniel. He experienced no aging effect when consuming food he hadn't paid for himself. This could work, Ellie said excitedly. Other people can provide for your basic needs without triggering the curse. Great, Daniel replied with a tired smile. I just need to become a complete dependent, relying on others for everything. It's a starting point, Ellie insisted. We keep exploring, testing different scenarios. Meanwhile, we minimize your personal spending to absolute necessities. As they reviewed their findings, a pattern emerged. The curse seemed specifically designed to prevent Daniel from enjoying his wealth in any conventional sense. Any attempt to use the money for his own benefit triggered the aging effect. The only expenditure that felt worth it was his mother's care, and even that would become problematic over time as the cumulative aging advanced. I've been thinking, Ellie said hesitantly as they packed up the monitoring equipment. What if we test giving larger amounts away? Not to conventional charities, but to specific causes where we could see the direct impact. Maybe the cost would feel more worthwhile if you could witness the good it does. Daniel considered this. The idea of using his cursed fortune to help others was appealing, a way to derive meaning from his impossible situation. Yet the mathematical reality remained stark. Even modest charitable giving would significantly shorten his life. We could start small, he suggested. Find local causes where even a few $1,000s could make a tangible difference. That night, after Ellie had gone, Daniel sat on his balcony, watching the city lights below. The pocket watch lay open beside him, ticking steadily. He had examined it thoroughly, looking for some connection to his curse, but found nothing unusual in its mechanism. Yet its resurrection from stillness seemed too coincidental to ignore. A new thought occurred to Daniel, one he hadn't shared with Ellie. What if the curse had a purpose beyond simple cruelty? What if it was, in some strange way, a test, not of his financial acumen or generosity, but of something more fundamental, his understanding of value itself? For the first time in his adult life, Daniel was forced to assign a precise value to everything. Was a coffee worth 1 year of life? A new car worth 30,000 years? His mother's care worth 375,000 years? The mathematics of mortality had stripped away all illusions, forcing him to confront the true cost of each decision. In a perverse way, it was clarifying. Money was no longer an abstraction, but a direct measure of life force. His life force. Daniel picked up the pocket watch, studying its familiar face. It had belonged to his grandfather first, then his father, and now him. 3 generations connected by this timepiece. 3 lives measured in ticks and tocks. Perhaps the solution wasn't to find a way around the curse, but to understand its purpose. To learn what it was trying to teach him about time, money, and value. With that thought, Daniel closed the watch and returned inside, a new determination taking root. If he couldn't escape the mathematics of his situation, perhaps he could master them, turn them to his advantage in ways the curse hadn't anticipated. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel and Ellie refined their understanding of the curse through careful experimentation. The rules became clearer. Any benefit Daniel personally derived from spending the lottery money cost him years of life, with the effect proportional to the amount spent. The aging was compressed but cumulative. His biological age now approached 50, though his chronological age remained 34. More troublingly, they discovered that while small expenditures caused immediate but minor aging, larger ones not only aged him more significantly, but seemed to affect his underlying health. After a test where he donated $10,000 to a local homeless shelter, Daniel experienced chest pains that lasted for days, along with fatigue and shortness of breath that suggested cardiovascular stress beyond simple aging. "Your body can't sustain this," Ellie warned, reviewing his latest medical readings. "Each large expenditure is like a minor heart attack. Keep this up, and one of them won't be minor." Daniel knew she was right, yet he couldn't shake the strange satisfaction he had felt watching his donation transform the shelter. New beds, improved security, a kitchen renovation that allowed for hot meals year-round. For the first time, he had seen the tangible impact of his cursed fortune, and it had moved him deeply. "What if we focus on maximum impact with minimum spending?" he suggested one evening as they sat in his living room, the remains of a takeout dinner Ellie had purchased spread before them. "Find situations where even small amounts can change lives dramatically?" Ellie looked thoughtful. "Like micro-lending in developing countries. A few $100s can start a business that supports an entire family." "Exactly." Or education scholarships for disadvantaged kids. Medical debt relief, where pennies on the dollar can free people from crushing burdens. Daniel felt a growing excitement. "We could develop an algorithm to identify opportunities with the highest human impact per dollar spent, optimizing your life years for maximum global benefit," Ellie murmured, a small smile playing at her lips. "Trust a math professor to approach this like an equation." "It's what I know," Daniel admitted. "Find the pattern, solve for the variables." Their new approach energized them both. They spent evenings researching global needs, identifying pressure points where targeted giving could create cascading positive effects. Daniel created sophisticated models to quantify human benefit against years of his life, attempting, in essence, to solve the ultimate cost-benefit analysis. But the mathematical precision of their planning couldn't eliminate the emotional weight of what they were doing. Each donation, each microloan, each scholarship fund established extracted its price from Daniel's lifespan. Though they kept individual transactions small, the cumulative effect was becoming increasingly evident. 1 month after discovering his curse, Daniel could no longer pass as a man in his early 40s. His hair was more grey than brown, deep lines bracketed his mouth, and he had developed the slightly stooped posture of someone approaching 60. Walking upstairs left him winded. He tired more easily and woke with various aches that had never troubled him before. Yet despite the physical toll, Daniel found himself experiencing a curious kind of peace. For the first time in his life, he was making a tangible difference in the world. His mother was receiving the best possible care. Children who might never have attended college were now receiving educations. Families in remote villages had clean water and electricity. Because of strategic microloans he had provided, the cost was high, terribly high, but the meaning it gave to his remaining years provided a counterbalance he hadn't anticipated. Ellie noticed the change in him. "You seem different," she observed one evening as they walked slowly through a park near his apartment, the autumn leaves crunching beneath their feet. "More at peace despite everything," Daniel nodded, taking her hand. Their relationship had evolved during their shared mission, growing deeper and more honest. Ellie had postponed her Seattle job indefinitely, choosing instead to remain by his side through this impossible journey. Her analytical mind and compassionate heart had become his, anchors in a reality that still sometimes felt surreal. "I've been thinking about time," he said as they paused by a small pond where ducks glided across the surface. "Before all this, I was always waiting for some future moment when things would be better. When I'd have more money, more security, more time. Now that I know exactly how much time I have, how it's directly tied to each decision I make, I'm actually more present than I've ever been." Ellie squeezed his hand. "That's beautiful, in a terrible way." "That's the thing about this curse," Daniel continued. "It's clarifying. Most people never have to confront the exact value of their time, the precise cost of their choices. I do. Every dollar I spend, every year I lose, it's all accounting. Perfect, merciless accounting." As they continued their walk, Daniel felt a now familiar tightness in his chest. Not the sharp pain of a new expenditure, but the chronic discomfort that had become his constant companion. Medical tests Ellie had arranged through her research connections confirmed what they already suspected. His heart was showing signs of advanced age, with arterial stiffening and reduced function consistent with a man in his 70s. At this rate, even without further significant expenditures, his doctors estimated he had perhaps 10 years left, possibly fewer if he continued to make even modest donations. 10 years. The number should have terrified him, but strangely it didn't. 10 years of purpose, of conscious choice, of knowing that each action had meaning and consequence. It felt more substantial than the vague, undefined future he had drifted through before winning the lottery. That night, after Ellie had gone home, Daniel sat on his balcony with his father's pocket watch open beside him. Its steady ticking had become a comfort rather than a torment, marking seconds that he now valued with unprecedented clarity. He thought about Ms. Wells and her cryptic words, "Everything comes with a price." Perhaps that had always been true, and his curse was merely making visible what remained hidden for others, the inexorable exchange of time for money, life force for material gain, that underpinned human existence. As he watched the city lights below, Daniel made a decision. He would continue their strategic giving program, accepting the cost to his own lifespan. But he would also seek the source of his curse, return to the Lottery Commission, confront Ms. Wells and demand answers. If he was to spend his remaining years wisely, he needed to understand not just the mathematics of his curse, but its purpose. The Lottery Commission building looked different in the grey light of a rainy autumn morning, less gleaming, more ominous. Daniel stood across the street, watching employees arrive with coffee cups and umbrellas. The mundane rhythm of a workday, belying the supernatural transaction that had occurred within those walls. "Are you sure about this?" Ellie asked, standing beside him beneath a shared umbrella. Her face was tense with concern. Daniel nodded. "I need answers, and maybe—" He hesitated, reluctant to voice the hope that had been growing within him. "Maybe there's a way to end this." They crossed the street and entered the building, droplets of rain sliding from their coats onto the polished marble floor. The security guard at the reception desk looked up with practiced indifference. "Can I help you?" "I need to see Ms. Harriet Wells," Daniel said. "It's regarding my recent lottery claim." The guard consulted his computer, then frowned. "There's no Harriet Wells working here, sir." Daniel felt a cold prickle along his spine. "That's impossible. She's the executive director. She processed my claim personally just last month. Sir, the executive director is Richard Tanner. Has been for 11 years. Daniel exchanged a glance with Ellie, whose expression mirrored his unease. "Can we speak with Mr. Tanner, then?" "It's important." After several phone calls and a half-hour wait in the lobby, they were escorted to the top floor, where Richard Tanner, a balding man in his 60s with kind eyes and a bow tie, greeted them warmly. "Mr. Morgan, congratulations again on your win. Though I must say you look different from your claim photo." His gaze moved curiously over Daniel's prematurely aged appearance. "That's actually why we're here," Daniel said. "When I claimed my prize, I dealt with a woman named Harriet Wells. She had me sign a special document." "Harriet Wells?" Tanner interrupted, his expression clouding. "You're certain that was the name?" "Absolutely certain." Tanner was silent for a moment, then gestured for them to sit. "Ms. Wells was indeed an executive director here, but not for the past 30 years. She retired in 1994 and passed away in 1998. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "That's impossible," Daniel insisted. "She was here in this office. She had me sign a document, a special terms acknowledgement. It was on unusual paper, like parchment." Tanner's face had grown increasingly grave. "Mr. Morgan, all our documents are standard legal forms. There is no special terms acknowledgement in our procedures." He hesitated, then added, "But there are stories, office legends really, about Ms. Wells and certain winners." "What kind of stories?" Ellie asked sharply. "It's probably nothing," Tanner said, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Old gossip from before my time, but some winners reported strange encounters with her even after her official retirement. Winners who had unusual luck, both good and bad." "I need to see her personnel file," Daniel said, an edge of desperation in his voice. "Any records you have about her. That would be highly irregular." "Please," Ellie interjected. "Daniel's health depends on it. You can see how he's aged since claiming the prize. Something is very wrong." Perhaps it was the genuine concern in Ellie's voice or the visible evidence of Daniel's accelerated aging. But Tanner relented. "Wait here," he said, rising from his desk. "Let me see what I can find in the archives." While Tanner was gone, Daniel paced the office, agitation making it impossible to sit still. "She wasn't human," he said quietly to Ellie, "or at least not entirely human. I sensed something was off about her, but I was too caught up in the excitement of winning to question it." Ellie squeezed his hand. "Let's not jump to conclusions until we see what Tanner finds." 30 minutes later, Tanner returned with a thin folder, his expression troubled. "This is all we have on Harriet Wells. Most of her personnel records were lost in a storage fire in 2001. Daniel opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a black and white photograph of a severe-looking woman in 1960s attire, unmistakably the same Ms. Wells who had processed his claim, apparently not having aged a day in over 60 years. Alongside the photo were sparse employment records and a single news clipping from 1998 reporting her death at age 87. Most disturbing, however, was a handwritten note at the bottom of her employment record: "Special Assignment, Equilibrium Division." "What's the Equilibrium Division?" Daniel asked. Tanner shook his head. "I've never heard of such a department here. But look at this." He pointed to another document in the folder. A list of lottery winners from the 1980s and early 1990s. Beside certain names were cryptic annotations. "Exchange initiated. Balance maintained. Debt settled." Daniel felt a chill as he recognized the language, similar to the strange phrasing on the document he had signed. "There's something else," Tanner said hesitantly. "After you called for this appointment, I asked our oldest employee about Ms. Wells. Clara's been here since the 1970s. She said Ms. Wells had a saying, Fortune must be paid for in kind. That's the cosmic balance. In kind, Ellie repeated. Money paid for with time. Do you have any way to contact others on this list? Daniel asked, pointing to the annotated winner names. Any of these people still alive? Tanner hesitated, then nodded slowly. I shouldn't do this, but given the circumstances, I'll see what contact information we still have. Some of these winners might have insights I can't provide, as they left the lottery commission with promises from Tanner to call when he had more information. Daniel felt both vindicated and unsettled. His curse was real, potentially part of a pattern stretching back decades. Others had encountered Ms. Wells and whatever supernatural force she represented or served. The Equilibrium Division, Ellie mused as they walked to her car. Maintaining cosmic balance through some kind of exchange system. Trading money for life, Daniel added grimly. Making sure no one gets something for nothing. That afternoon, they researched the names from the annotated list, searching public records and news archives for any patterns. What emerged was disturbing. Of the 12 names marked with exchange initiated, 11 had died within 10 years of their wins, despite most being relatively young when they claimed their prizes. The causes varied: heart attacks, strokes, rapid onset cancers, accidents. But the premature deaths were consistent. Only one name lacked a death record, Eleanor Vance, who had won a modest jackpot in 1992. According to the last public record they could find, she was still alive, residing in a small town about 3 hours' drive from the city. We need to talk to her, Daniel said decisively. She's the only one who might understand what's happening to me and how to stop it. The pocket watch in his coat seemed to tick louder at his words, as if responding to his determination. Daniel placed his hand over it, feeling the rhythm against his palm like a second heartbeat. If anyone could help him understand the mathematics of his curse, the equations governing this cosmic balance, it would be someone who had lived with similar terms. For over 30 years, Eleanor Vance might hold the key to solving the ultimate variable in his impossible equation, how to reclaim his future without surrendering the good his cursed fortune could do in the world. The small town of Millfield appeared frozen in time, its main street lined with brick buildings that could have belonged to any decade of the past 50 years. Daniel drove slowly, following the directions from the elderly man at the gas station on the edge of town. The blue house on Pine Hill, the man had said, eyeing Daniel's aged appearance with mild curiosity. Everyone knows Miss Ellie, town benefactor, you might say. Keeps to herself mostly, but generous with her foundation. Ellie glanced at Daniel as they turned onto a narrow road winding up a wooded hill. Foundation, she repeated. Sounds like she found a way to use her money. The blue house stood alone at the top of the hill, a Victorian structure with a wraparound porch and meticulously maintained gardens. Despite its impressive size, it had a lived-in quality that prevented it from seeming ostentatious. As they parked in the circular driveway, the front door opened. A woman stepped onto the porch, elderly but straight-backed, with silver hair cut in a stylish bob and keen eyes that assessed them from behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore simple but elegant clothes, linen pants, a blue cashmere sweater, comfortable leather flats. Miss Vance, Daniel called as they approached. My name is Daniel Morgan. This is Ellie Harrison. We were hoping to speak with you about Harriet Wells, the woman finished for him, her voice stronger than her age might suggest. I've been expecting you. Or someone like you. Come in. Surprised, they followed her into a home that managed to be both grand and comfortable. Bookcases lined the walls, and large windows captured the autumn light, illuminating artwork that Daniel recognized as original pieces by significant artists. Tea? Eleanor offered, leading them to a sunroom overlooking the town below. Yes. Thank you, Ellie answered for them both. As Eleanor busied herself with a sleek electric kettle and fine china cups, Daniel observed her carefully. Despite her advanced age, she must be in her 80s now, she moved with the confidence and energy of someone decades younger. Her hands were slightly gnarled with arthritis, but her movements remained precise. "You're wondering how I'm still alive," Eleanor said without preamble as she set the tea service on a small table between comfortable chairs. "When all the others with the mark died young," Daniel started. "How did you recognize another of Harriet's chosen ones?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "It's in your eyes. That calculation, constantly weighing, measuring, evaluating. The mathematics of mortality becomes second nature after a while. Then it's true," Daniel said, his voice hoarse. "You have the same curse. Every dollar spent takes a year off your life," Eleanor finished. "Yes, though I prefer to think of it as a condition rather than a curse. Or perhaps a correction." "A correction?" Ellie asked, accepting a cup of tea. Eleanor settled into her chair, studying them both. "The universe maintains equilibrium. Most people trade their time for money in small, unnoticed increments, working jobs they dislike, sacrificing health for wealth, missing life while accumulating the means to live it. Harriet simply made that exchange explicit for a chosen few. But why?" Daniel pressed. "Why us?" "She never explained her selection criteria," Eleanor replied. "But I have theories. We're all mathematicians of some kind, have you noticed? In my case, I was an economist. You?" "Mathematics professor," Daniel confirmed, a chill running through him at this new connection. "People who understand value systems," Eleanor nodded. "Who appreciate the elegance of equations. Who can comprehend the true nature of the exchange." Daniel leaned forward, unable to contain the question that had driven him here. "How have you survived so long? The others on Harriet's list, they all died within a decade." Eleanor's expression grew somber. "They spent too much too quickly, treated the condition as a puzzle to be solved or conquered, rather than a parameter to be respected." She gestured around her. "I took a different approach." She rose with a slight stiffness and walked to a cabinet, from which she withdrew a leather-bound ledger. "This is my life's work, the formula I developed to optimize the exchange." Opening the ledger, she revealed pages of meticulous calculations, graphs, and annotations spanning decades. Daniel recognized the work of a brilliant mathematical mind, complex equations modeling the relationship between expenditure, aging, and human benefit. "The key insight," Eleanor explained, "is that the condition responds to intention and outcome, not just the raw dollar amount. A dollar spent selfishly ages you exactly 1 year, but a dollar spent to create genuine good in the world, measurable, sustainable good, costs somewhat less." Daniel's heart raced. "How much less?" "It varies. My calculations suggest approximately 0.85 years per dollar when the expenditure directly saves or substantially improves human lives. The effect is most pronounced when the spending creates ripple effects. Education that enables further education, infrastructure that enables commerce, health interventions that allow productive lives. That's why you created a foundation," Ellie realized. Eleanor nodded. "The Vance Foundation operates on principles derived from my equation. Every dollar is allocated to maximize human benefit while minimizing the life cost to me." She smiled slightly. "I've donated over $70 million over the past 30 years. By normal calculations, I should have died decades ago. Instead, I've aged approximately 55 years since my win." Daniel's mind raced, calculating the implications. "That's significant. Instead of losing 70 million years, you've lost around 60 million. Still an enormous cost, but spread over 3 decades, it allowed me to create a mathematical legacy far beyond what I could have achieved otherwise," Eleanor finished. "And to live a life of meaning, if not conventional longevity." She turned to a newer page in her ledger. "I've refined the formula over time. More recently, I've discovered that collaborative giving, pooling resources with non-cursed donors, further reduces the life cost. When others freely contribute their money alongside mine, the burden is diffused somewhat." Ellie leaned forward, studying the equations. "This is brilliant. You've essentially created a mathematical framework for maximizing altruistic impact while minimizing personal cost. I call it the equilibrium equation." Eleanor said with quiet pride. It's not a cure for our condition, but it transforms it from a death sentence into a management problem. Daniel felt a surge of hope for the first time since discovering his curse. Will you share your complete formula with us? Help me apply it to my situation? Eleanor studied him for a long moment. I'll do better than that. I'll propose a partnership. The Morgan Vance Initiative. Your fresh funds combined with my decades of experience and established channels. Her eyes gleamed with sudden enthusiasm. Together, we could optimize the equation further, perhaps even discover new variables I haven't identified alone. As the afternoon stretched into evening, they delved deeper into Eleanor's mathematical framework. She shared stories of her early mistakes, luxury, purchases that aged her rapidly before she understood the pattern, and her gradual development of the formula that had allowed her to survive while doing meaningful good. The watch, Daniel said, suddenly remembering. Do you have one too? Something that started working after you received the curse? Eleanor smiled and reached into her pocket, producing a silver fob watch that looked remarkably similar to his father's. It belonged to my grandmother, she said. It started ticking the moment I signed Harriet's contract. Mine too, Daniel said, pulling out his father's watch. When he held it near Eleanor's, both timepieces seemed to tick more loudly for a moment, their rhythms perfectly synchronized. They're connected, Eleanor nodded. Markers of our condition. Mine has never stopped, even when I was certain I had spent enough to kill me twice over. As they prepared to leave, promises of collaboration established, and plans to meet again the following week in place, Eleanor took Daniel's hand. Her skin was paper-thin with age, but her grip remained surprisingly strong. Remember this, Daniel. The condition can be a curse or a catalyst. It depends entirely on how you approach the mathematics. Most people waste their lives earning money they never meaningfully use. We have the opposite problem. Money we can use only by sacrificing our lives. There's a profound symmetry in that. In the car driving back to the city, Daniel was quiet, processing everything they had learned. Eleanor's equilibrium equation offered a path forward, not a cure but a way to optimize his remaining years while magnifying the good his cursed fortune could do. What are you thinking? Ellie asked as darkness fell, her face illuminated intermittently by passing streetlights. I'm thinking about value, Daniel replied. About what a year of life is worth. About what truly matters. The pocket watch ticked in his coat, steady and insistent. Not a countdown to death, he realized now, but a reminder of the preciousness of each moment. A call to make every second and every dollar count. Winter descended on the city, transforming its sharp edges with snow that muted the urban clamor. Daniel stood at the window of his new office, watching flakes spiral past the glass, each following its unique mathematical trajectory toward the ground. 3 months had passed since their meeting with Eleanor Vance. In that time, Daniel and Ellie, with Eleanor's guidance, had established the Morgan Foundation, a carefully structured entity designed to implement the equilibrium equation on a scale Eleanor had never attempted. The office itself was modest, functional rather than luxurious, occupying the renovated top floor of an old manufacturing building. Every design choice had been calculated according to Eleanor's formula, spending that created jobs and revitalized a struggling neighborhood while minimizing the life cost to Daniel. The board members are here, Ellie said, entering the room with a tablet in hand. Over the past months, she had become not just his partner in understanding the curse, but his formal partner in the foundation, in bringing her medical research expertise to their philanthropic algorithms. Daniel nodded, turning from the window. At 62, his accelerated biological age, he moved more carefully now, conserving energy. His hair had turned completely silver, and the lines in his face had deepened, but his eyes remained sharp behind new reading glasses. The Foundation's board consisted of carefully selected experts in various fields: education, public health, economic development, environmental sustainability. None knew about Daniel's condition. They attributed his aged appearance to a medical condition he preferred not to discuss. What mattered was their commitment to data-driven philanthropy and measurable outcomes. As the meeting progressed, Daniel observed the passionate discussion with quiet satisfaction. The Morgan Foundation was becoming known for its unusual approach, targeting overlooked leverage points where modest investments could trigger cascading positive effects. Their first major initiative, a microfinance program coupled with education for women entrepreneurs in developing regions, was already showing promising results. Eleanor's equation was proving its worth. By focusing on high-impact interventions, collaborative funding models, and long-term sustainability, Daniel had managed to direct over $50 million of his fortune while aging biologically by only about 30 years, far less than the 1-to-1 ratio he had initially experienced. After the board departed, Daniel settled behind his desk, reviewing the latest data from their projects. His mother's condition had stabilized at Meadowbrook, where she now participated in an experimental cognitive therapy program funded by the foundation. She rarely recognized Daniel anymore. His accelerated aging had made him unrecognizable to her fading memory, but she seemed content, often found tending the facility's garden or reading to other residents. "You should go home," Ellie said, returning to find him still working as evening darkened the windows. "You've been pushing yourself too hard lately." Daniel smiled up at her. Their relationship had evolved into something deeper than romance, a partnership of minds and purpose that transcended conventional categories. Ellie had become his mathematical complement, bringing her own brilliance to their shared equation. "I'm reviewing the education initiative in Malawi," he said. "The preliminary results are remarkable. For every dollar invested, we're seeing approximately $1.7 in economic growth within the community, plus measurable improvements in health outcomes and gender equality indicators." Ellie placed a hand on his shoulder. "And the personal cost?" Daniel consulted the specialized app they had developed to track his condition. According to Eleanor's formula, each dollar spent on this particular initiative cost me approximately 0.72 years, the best ratio we've achieved yet. "People who understand value systems," Eleanor nodded, "who appreciate the elegance of equations, who can comprehend the true nature of the exchange." Daniel leaned forward, unable to contain the question that had driven him here. "How have you survived so long?" "The others on Harriet's list, they all died within a decade." Eleanor's expression grew somber. "They spent too much too quickly, treated the condition as a puzzle to be solved or conquered, rather than a parameter to be respected." She gestured around her. "I took a different approach." She rose with a slight stiffness and walked to a cabinet, from which she withdrew a leather-bound ledger. "This is my life's work, the formula I developed to optimize the exchange." Opening the ledger, she revealed pages of meticulous calculations, graphs, and annotations spanning decades. Daniel recognized the work of a brilliant mathematical mind, complex equations modeling the relationship between expenditure, aging, and human benefit. "The key insight," Eleanor explained, "is that the condition responds to intention and outcome, not just the raw dollar amount. A dollar spent selfishly ages you exactly 1 year, but a dollar spent to create genuine good in the world, measurable, sustainable good, costs somewhat less." Daniel's heart raced. "How much less?" "It varies. My calculations suggest approximately 0.85 years per dollar, when the expenditure directly saves or substantially improves human lives. The effect is most pronounced when the spending creates ripple effects: education that enables further education, infrastructure that enables commerce, health interventions that allow productive lives. That's why you created a foundation," Ellie realized. Eleanor nodded. "The Vance Foundation operates on principles derived from my equation. Every dollar is allocated to maximize human benefit while minimizing the life cost to me." She smiled slightly. "I've donated over $70 million over the past 30 years. By normal calculations, I should have died decades ago. Instead, I've aged approximately 55 years since my win. Daniel's mind raced, calculating the implications. That's significant. Instead of losing 70 million years, you've lost around 60 million. Still an enormous cost, but spread over 3 decades. It allowed me to create a mathematical legacy far beyond what I could have achieved otherwise, Eleanor finished. And to live a life of meaning, if not conventional longevity. She turned to a newer page in her ledger. I've refined the formula over time. More recently, I've discovered that collaborative giving, pooling resources with non-cursed donors, further reduces the life cost. When others freely contribute their money alongside mine, the burden is diffused somewhat. Ellie leaned forward, studying the equations. This is brilliant. You've essentially created a mathematical framework for maximizing altruistic impact while minimizing personal cost. I call it the equilibrium equation, Eleanor said with quiet pride. It's not a cure for our condition, but it transforms it from a death sentence into a management problem. Daniel felt a surge of hope for the first time since discovering his curse. Will you share your complete formula with us? Help me apply it to my situation? Eleanor studied him for a long moment. I'll do better than that. I'll propose a partnership, the Morgan Vance Initiative. Your fresh funds combined with my decades of experience and established channels. Her eyes gleamed with sudden enthusiasm. Together, we could optimize the equation further, perhaps even discover new variables I haven't identified alone. As the afternoon stretched into evening, they delved deeper into Eleanor's mathematical framework. She shared stories of her early mistakes, luxury, purchases that aged her rapidly before she understood the pattern, and her gradual development of the formula that had allowed her to survive while doing meaningful good. The watch, Daniel said suddenly, remembering. Do you have one too? Something that started working after you received the curse? Eleanor smiled and reached into her pocket, producing a silver fob watch that looked remarkably similar to his father's. It belonged to my grandmother, she said. It started ticking the moment I signed Harriet's contract. Mine too, Daniel said, pulling out his father's watch. When he held it near Eleanor's, both timepieces seemed to tick more loudly for a moment, their rhythms perfectly synchronized. They're connected, Eleanor nodded. Markers of our condition. Mine has never stopped, even when I was certain I had spent enough to kill me twice over. As they prepared to leave, promises of collaboration established and plans to meet again the following week in place, Eleanor took Daniel's hand. Her skin was paper-thin with age, but her grip remained surprisingly strong. Remember this, Daniel. The condition can be a curse or a catalyst. It depends entirely on how you approach the mathematics. Most people waste their lives earning money they never meaningfully use. We have the opposite problem, money we can use only by sacrificing our lives. There's a profound symmetry in that. In the car driving back to the city, Daniel was quiet, processing everything they had learned. Eleanor's equilibrium equation offered a path forward. Not a cure, but a way to optimize his remaining years while magnifying the good his cursed fortune could do. What are you thinking? Ellie asked as darkness fell, her face illuminated intermittently by passing streetlights. I'm thinking about value, Daniel replied. About what a year of life is worth. About what truly matters. The pocket watch ticked in his coat, steady and insistent. Not a countdown to death, he realized now, but a reminder of the preciousness of each moment. A call to make every second and every dollar count. Winter descended on the city, transforming its sharp edges with snow that muted the urban clamor. Daniel stood at the window of his new office, watching flakes spiral past the glass, each following its unique mathematical trajectory toward the ground. 3 months had passed since their meeting with Eleanor Vance. In that time, Daniel and Ellie, with Eleanor's guidance, had established the Morgan Foundation, a carefully structured entity designed to implement the equilibrium equation on a scale Eleanor had never attempted. The office itself was modest, functional rather than luxurious, occupying the renovated top floor of an old manufacturing building. Every design choice had been calculated according to Eleanor's formula. Spending that created jobs and revitalized a struggling neighborhood while minimizing the life cost to Daniel. "The board members are here," Ellie said, entering the room with a tablet in hand. Over the past months, she had become not just his partner in understanding the curse, but his formal partner in the foundation, bringing her medical research expertise to their philanthropic algorithms. Daniel nodded, turning from the window. At 62, his accelerated biological age, he moved more carefully now, conserving energy. His hair had turned completely silver, and the lines in his face had deepened. But his eyes remained sharp behind new reading glasses. The Foundation's board consisted of carefully selected experts in various fields: education, public health, economic development, environmental sustainability. None knew about Daniel's condition. They attributed his aged appearance to a medical condition he preferred not to discuss. What mattered was their commitment to data-driven philanthropy and measurable outcomes. As the meeting progressed, Daniel observed the passionate discussion with quiet satisfaction. The Morgan Foundation was becoming known for its unusual approach, targeting overlooked leverage points where modest investments could trigger cascading positive effects. Their first major initiative, a microfinance program coupled with education for women entrepreneurs in developing regions, was already showing promising results. Eleanor's equation was proving its worth. By focusing on high-impact interventions, collaborative funding models, and long-term sustainability, Daniel had managed to direct over $50 million of his fortune while aging biologically by only about 30 years, far less than the 1-to-1 ratio he had initially experienced. After the board departed, Daniel settled behind his desk, reviewing the latest data from their projects. His mother's condition had stabilized at Meadowbrook, where she now participated in an experimental cognitive therapy program funded by the foundation. She rarely recognized Daniel anymore. His accelerated aging had made him unrecognizable to her fading memory, but she seemed content, often found tending the facility's garden or reading to other residents. "You should go home," Ellie said, returning to find him still working as evening darkened the windows. "You've been pushing yourself too hard lately," Daniel smiled up at her. Their relationship had evolved into something deeper than romance, a partnership of minds and purpose that transcended conventional categories. Ellie had become his mathematical complement, bringing her own brilliance to their shared equation. "I'm reviewing the education initiative in Malawi," he said. "The preliminary results are remarkable. For every dollar invested, we're seeing approximately $1.7 in economic growth within the community, plus measurable improvements in health outcomes and gender equality indicators." Ellie placed a hand on his shoulder. "And the personal cost?" Daniel consulted the specialized app they had developed to track his condition. According to Eleanor's formula, each dollar spent on this particular initiative costs me approximately 0.072 years, the best ratio we've achieved yet.